I can't believe that a mortal can cultivate into an invincible immortal. Perhaps due to his two lives, Zhang Yan, who was already gifted with eclipse writing, felt that he was now even more agile and nimble, and not only rarely made mistakes in divination and deduction, but also was several times faster than usual. He could earn money by helping others interpret eclipse writing. However, this was not enough. He held the broken jade in his hand and smiled. With it, he would be more sure. He looked up at the sky and saw that it was already the morning hour. The light outside was brightening and the mountain mist was dissipating. He stood up, took a bamboo basket that he had prepared, and walked slowly out with the bamboo banner in his hand. His residence was a cave-like rock house carved out of the cliff by the Xianxia Temple, which was convenient for people who came to the mountain to seek solitude, meditate, and mine. Outside the cave, a wooden plank road was built for traffic, with no guardrails on the outside. Within 3 steps, there was a towering cliff, which was awe-inspiring to look at. However, he had lived here alone for 3 years, and had already taken the sea as an easy road. Naturally, he walked easily and walked straight out of the plank road. Along the mountain road, there were a total of 18 peaks and 36 water streams in Kangwu Mountain. At the top of the 9th peak, Yueqiong Peak, there was a flat and smooth boulder called 1,000 People Rock. Whenever the rising sun rose and the clouds flew, hundreds of disciples in the Xianxia Temple got up early to exhale and inhale, taking in the essence of heaven and earth. It took about half an hour to walk from Zhang Yan's residence on the stargazing peak to the 1,000-foot rock. By the time he arrived, the disciples had already dispersed for their morning classes, and only a few of them were gathered together to talk about their experiences in cultivation. He didn't pay much attention to them, and found a cool pavilion with a wide view for himself. He sat down on a stone bench, raised the bamboo flute, spread out the ink, paper, and inkstone, and sat there with eyes closed and without speaking. After a while, a person came over and stepped on the stone steps in front of the pavilion. He looked at the bamboo flute and then at Zhang Yan, and glared at him, saying, "Explain the eclipse scriptures? Brother, you don't have a high level of cultivation, but you dare to say such big words." The person who came was about 20 years old, with a broad chest and round waist, a sturdy figure, and a blue robe with sleeves rolled up to the lower arm, revealing strong muscles. His eyes were bright, and his face had a faint jade color, indicating that he had achieved the state of concentrating the essence and manifesting the intention and had reached a high level of cultivation. People with such accomplishments should not be underestimated. His doubts were obviously correct. Generally speaking, whether or not you can interpret the eclipse text has a lot to do with your cultivation level. If you haven't reached that level, how can you explain the meaning of the book to others? The deeper the pool, the more water it can hold. This is an eternal truth. Of course, if someone spends their entire life studying obscure texts, they may achieve something. For example, those who know that they have no hope of achieving their religious goals but are deeply interested in metaphysics. However, these people are first of all well-fed and have devoted their entire lives to studying. Zhang Yan looks like he is not even 20 years old and has not even succeeded in building his yuan. It can be said that he has no cultivation, so how can he convince others? Zhang Yan smiled, looking very gentle and polite, and stood up and bowed. "You can try it," he said. Seeing Zhang Yan's calm expression, as if he really knew something, the man couldn't help but feel curious and also bowed. "I am Milu, a disciple of the Shield Temple. What is your name, brother?" Zhang Yan returned the bow and said, "I'm not sure. I'm Zhang Yan, a disciple of the Xianxia Temple." The Shield Temple and the Xianxia Temple are both one of the 3 lower houses of the main Song sect. The disciples of the 2 schools often come and go to discuss Taoism, but there has been a major event on Sangwu Mountain in the past few days, which has gathered many disciples of the 3 temples. Most of them lie on the relatively flat Yueqiong Peak. Miu laughed and sat down in front of Zhang Yan, saying, "I don't know what the requirements are for interpreting the eclipse script. Grain and silver can both be exchanged." Zhang Yan pointed to a small line of characters at the bottom corner of the long banner. His first priority was to solve the problem of livelihood, which was the top priority at the moment. Minlu looked at it and found that Zhang Yan wasn't asking for much. If he could really interpret the eclipse script, it would be a bargain. Well, I can still afford the rice and money. Here, I have a Taoist book. Minlu was also a straightforward person. He took a thin Taoist book from his bosom and slammed it down on the stone table with a joking expression. Please have a look. Zhang Yan calmly took the Taoist book, flipped through a few pages, smiled slightly, took a pen and dipped it in ink, and without thinking, began to write rapidly on a white sheet of paper. Minlu's expression froze. He said in surprise, "Oh, you don't use bamboo divination sticks to deduce." Usually when interpreting Taoist books, people use bamboo divination sticks to make predictions, but without bamboo divination sticks, he had only seen this kind of skill from a few highly advanced introductory brothers. No need. Zhang Yan didn't lift his head, and although his tone was flat, the confidence in it was enough to infect others. Although Minlu was still skeptical in his heart, his expression changed from being playful to a bit serious. Zhang Yan flipped through dozens of pages without feeling any obstacles. Also, if it were a book from Dao Mingdao, he probably wouldn't be willing to take it out and show it to him at will. However, after flipping through a few more pages, his brow furrowed and he couldn't help but pause slightly. Minlu caught a glimpse of Zhang Yan's expression and couldn't help but secretly smile. The previous content in this Taoist book is not much, but there are a few obstacles that are quite puzzling. At the beginning, he consulted an entry-level senior brother to understand it. Even so, there are still some obscure details that are still in doubt. He does not believe that only a named disciple of the other party can interpret them. Although encountering a difficult situation, Zhang Yan did not panic. Instead, he quietly grasped the residual jade in his sleeve with his left hand and immersed himself in it. After a while, he continued to write. In Minlu's eyes, Zhang Yan only closed his eyes for a moment of contemplation, then picked up his pen and continued to write, revealing a puzzled expression. Suddenly, he thought that Zhang Yan might have skipped this paragraph. But this is also a common occurrence in interpreting etchings. This time, he was just a whim with a hint of teasing, so he didn't expect any results. After about half an hour, Zhang Yan's pen tip was repeatedly raised and finally stopped. Then he picked up the white paper and dried it, handing it to Minlu. Minlu took it with a smile, took a look, and casually praised, "Good call, good call." But after taking a few more looks, he was shocked. The more he looked, the more surprised he became, and finally, he stood up and stared at Zhang Yan speechlessly. The words in this interpreted Taoist book are very concise and incisive. It can be seen that Zhang Yan is not only a scholar, but also has great achievements in the field of literary criticism. Not only that, he also clearly explained all his previous doubts. You know, this was interpreted in less than an hour. Minlu's gaze towards Zhang Yan suddenly changed. He put on a look of admiration and said sincerely, "Elder martial brother, you are very skillful. I bow to you." Before questioning Zhang Yan, he didn't believe that the other party had this ability. Now that Zhang Yan has proven to be a real talent, his attitude and tone immediately became much more respectful. Zhang Yan bowed and said, "I'm ashamed to say that I only rely on this for a living." Minlu waved the paper in his hand and laughed. "With such skills, what do you worry about? My brother and I will come and bother you often in the future." Being able to interpret Taoist books with just a little money and goods was a great bargain for him. Although Zhang Yan is now in a slump, he will have a future. If you don't make friends with people like him now, you may not have that opportunity in the future. Zhang Yan immediately stood up and bowed, saying, "In that case, thank you for your help, senior brother." Minlu was shocked, but then he laughed and said, "Senior brother Zhang is also a wonderful person." Zhang Yan smiled without saying anything. Not everyone is as confident as Minlu, but since he said he was willing to seek the help of his fellow disciples to take care of his business, regardless of whether it was right or not, It was better to say it clearly and let him have no choice but to accept, and it seems that Minlu is not an ordinary disciple of Taoism. After a while, they will naturally develop a friendship, so why not do it? Minlu then laughed without mentioning money. Zhang Yan didn't ask too much, and his expression was calm, as if they had forgotten about it. At noon, 4 servants dressed in uniforms each pushed a wheelbarrow to the pavilion of Qian's Hanjin. The first person in front bowed respectfully to Zhang Yan and said, "Is this Mr. Zhang? We are the servants of Mr. Min, and we have been instructed by him to deliver these rice, money, and goods to your residence." Zhang Yan nodded and said, "Everyone, please wait for a moment." He was not in a hurry to turn back, and these servants did not seem impatient. They quietly waited on the side, which naturally attracted many people to stop and watch. However, apart from Minlu, no one else came to take care of his business that day. Only a few people asked a few questions, and no matter who it was, Zhang Yan answered them one by one. It was not until the sun was setting that he closed up shop and took 4 servants with him to push the wheelbarrow back to their residence.